Good evening, and good evening. May the peace of God be with you. So excited to be with you this evening for our evening Bible study on a Thursday. I ask for your forgiveness in advance. I've been struggling with a cold on my throat and my voice have been bothering me, so hopefully I can project a little bit tonight, better than I would have been able to do last night. But I pray that you are having a great day, had a great day, enjoyed some of this fantastic weather we have been getting. And we were in Matthew 4 2 weeks ago, and now we're in Matthew 5. We'll be scaling and scanning the book of Matthew for the remainder of our study, uh, living life on purpose, discovering God on our journey. And I believe this passage specifically really speaks to the inward journey that must take place first before we can have an outward journey. We have to navigate our dispositions, our mentality, our perspective before we can be who we are in the material world. And a better way of saying that, we have to know who we are on the inside so we can manifest it on the outside. And I thank you. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, First Baptist Church of Wayne's YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, and don't miss any of our updates. Make sure you send a email to info@fbcwayne.org so you can be a part of all of our events and everything going forward, that you don't miss a thing. So Matthew chapter 5, but I want to begin with the word of prayer. Lord, we give you thanks and praise because we're grateful. Grateful for this moment, grateful for this time, grateful for this day, for this is the day you've made. And we come to rejoice and to be glad and glad we are so thankful for another day, for another day's journey, for bringing us forward. Now use us tonight, wherever we're situated at, all of our members and affiliates all across the country. Use this stream, this broadcast, whenever folks may tune in, as a word of encouragement and power. Speak to them, speak to us, because we need a word from you. If we don't hear from you, what can we do? And join us. We invite you. In your name we pray. Amen. Matthew chapter 5, commonly known as the Beatitudes. And the Beatitudes are sayings of Jesus, particularly 8 blessings. Blessed are you, blessed are they. 8 blessings recounted by Jesus in what is called the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, which we're looking at, and 4 blessings in the Sermon on the Plain. If you read them concomitantly meaning seeing, reading them side by side, reading them together in the Gospel of Luke. The word blessed in the Greek, makarios, includes being fortunate, happy, and privileged. Blessedness does not depend on wealth, health, or status, but blessed in this context, meaning we're blessed, means having the access to God's abundance. And in Deuteronomy 28, which I would argue that these sayings are built off, where we get our popular song, Fred Hammond, blessed in the city, blessed in the field, blessed when we come, blessed when we go. If you read Deuteronomy chapter 28 from verses 1 through 14, you see all of these pronouncements of blessings. We're head not to tail, we're the lender, not the borrower. So if you don't have a blessed mentality, you'll never have a blessed reality. Preach, Pastor Brew. If you don't have a blessed mentality, you'll never have a blessed reality. If you don't have an abundant mentality, you won't have an abundant reality. If you don't have a prosperous mentality, you will have a prosperous reality. And I was listening to my girl before I launched into Matthew 5, Rachel Hollis, another thinker that I love. And she says, when you give your power away, she did this whole podcast about 5 reasons why we should go for what is burning in our souls, our dreams, our visions, whether it's something small, like going back to not small, something like going back to school, or getting in better health, starting a business, or traveling around the world. She gets 5 reasons of why we should do that now. Don't wait. And she says sometimes we allow the archetypes, this symbol of a person who we met in 3rd grade, whose voice still rings in our ears, who may have uh, told us that we wasn't good enough, didn't have any worth. She says, you'll be surprised how those voices never lead us. But when we keep buying into those narratives and those stories of people and places that said things to us 10, 15, 20 years ago, and we still allow it to be true, she says, we give our power away. And when we give our power away, we give our future away. And Jesus is trying to instruct his disciples. And as he's growing this ministry, as he's growing this new perspective, he's trying to he's trying to get them to understand, and us reading it thousands of years later, that when we give our power away, we give our future away. Verse 1 of chapter 5 of Matthew. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up to the mountain. That's why it's called Sermon on the Mount. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him, and he began to speak and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I want to look at each one tonight, if I can do it without holding this unnecessarily long. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And at this time, Jesus, he already been baptized. He's already been tempted in the wilderness. He's called his first 4 disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. He's been teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the good news, healing the sick, curing diseases. Now he wants them to learn some principles. He wants them to learn. He wants us to learn these principles. He's introducing a new value system, a new ethos he's presenting to the culture that goes against the dominant perspective of the day, which is the Roman imperial government, the Roman government that overtaxed these people of color, the Roman government that pushed them and marginalized them, the Roman government that disempowers them on every event, discriminates against them. Jesus is coming to introduce a new set of ideals built on this dynamic of God's idea of the kingdom, this new reality, this new way of thinking, as we say in the Black church, new way of walking, new way of talking. And Jesus builds this idea of this new community, this new set of ideals and principles upon these ideals. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Poor in spirit, those who lack and are materially bereft, and therefore were worn down by the plight of poverty. It's amazing that how the Romans could do so well and Caesar and all of his constituents can live in palaces, and down the street, Palestinians like Jesus and his band of disciples lived in abject poverty. That's why in the Lord's Prayer we'll get to, it says, give us this day our daily bread, because they were hoping that maybe this is the day where I can get some bread. Give us this day so we can get a ration, so we can get a portion of something to eat. Because poverty was so ubiquitous all around in those days for these people. And those who society has left behind, who break their backs to make ends meet, who struggle for basic survival, who have their spirits crushed. Jesus says theirs is this new kingdom. He's saying you have accessibility now to divine power, divine abundance, divine opportunities. For there will be no poor in spirit there. God is setting things right. Jesus is speaking in the duality. He's speaking about a perspective, an idea that can manifest now if we work for it. It can happen today if we organize, if we served each other, if we volunteered, if we showed up. The kingdom of heaven is at work. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And this is just not a spiritual poor, oh, my soul is languishing. No, poor in spirit also means I'm poor in spirit because of the sociological circumstances that surround me and give me anxiety and give me and feed into my mental instability. When I don't know where my next meal is coming from, I'll be poor in spirit. When I'm worrying about the police officers of the Roman society that can stop and frisk me and violate me at any given moment, like they did and like they still do, it forces me to be poor in spirit. But Jesus says, if you're like that, God says, yours is the kingdom of heaven. This abundant, this new virtue, this new community, these new opportunities. Blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. Notice this target audience, poor in spirit, those who mourn, those who know how it is to go through the dark night of mourning when losing someone, losing some things in you, mourn. Jesus says, you will be comforted. In Isaiah 40, it says, comfort. That's the first word God says to the people who are in exile, comfort. Those who have mourned the past, mourned the loss of culture. It's true for us today. Back in the days, even in Baptist churches, when I was a kid, First Baptist Church passed down a mourner's bench, an isolated spot for those who needed to mourn. And oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this, of trying to rush through and not allow others to have space for more and not even do my own because life goes on. But Jesus says, if you're in a perpetual state of mourning, trust that comfort is on the way. The audience of the gospel, the Jesus audience, say when they're reading this after his death and resurrection, ascension, maybe 70 CE. And they were often grieved by the violation of their humanity, their space, their property, their money, their religious practices. Their land was occupied by outside forces, land that God said he gave to the ancestors. People had come and colonized. But a coming comfort is coming for those who are mourning. Blessed are those. Blessed are those. Where's that? That's not it. Verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, dikiasune, which we would use the term justice. They shall be filled. Jesus says, we need those who thirst and hunger for righteousness. We need those who will raise their voices. They're blessed people. You may not disagree, you may not agree with all their methods, their timing, but somebody has got to raise the clarion call and say, this is not right. Jesus says, those who have a thirst and a hunger for that kind of work, for the vulnerable society, they they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. We was Luke 18. And there's two different prayers happening that Jesus is giving an example to. If my memory is correct, Luke 18, 1 through 6. And this affluent clergy person we would know today, but back then they call them Pharisees in Jewish culture, who were students and zealots for the law. And one of the prayers he prayed when he looked at this man who was unkept, didn't smell good, didn't look like he been in church for a while, didn't have the church isms and jargons. He looks at him and prays to God, God, I thank you, I'm not like him. The man says, Lord, have mercy on me. In Lamentations chapter 3, 22 through 24, talks about how we get brand new mercies every day. And one way you'll see mercy in your life, the only way you'll see mercy in your life is to give mercy to someone else. And you can't give them that get back. James Brown talks about on the big payback. No, to get mercy, you gotta give mercy. Jesus says to those who practice mercy, who do ministries of mercy, who look after those who can't look after themselves, those who give their resources and care for the outcast, those who go beyond the call of duty will receive mercy. See, in Rome wasn't about mercy. Rome was about showing power. And you can't get mercy and want to exploit people with your power. Jesus says, blessed are those, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed, I love this one. This might be my favorite one. Are the pure at heart, for they shall see God. When it was read in church when I was a kid, I used to pray that God will purify my heart so I could see God when I die. I don't read that the same anymore. Now I read it like this, and maybe you can understand it, that when our hearts are in tune, when our hearts are in the right place, those moments where our hearts are purified at its best, we see God moving in the world. We see God moving in our family, our neighborhoods, our churches. But if my heart is not right, I can't see God. That's the inverse. When your heart is not right, you can't see God. So I got to work on my heart. I can't hold grudges, and I got to let folks go. And I can't um, be petty. No, no, no. I can't see God that way. So my heart can either help me see God, or my heart can keep me from seeing God. Blessed are the pure at heart, for they shall see God. When my heart is right, I see God moving. I'm more grateful. I'm more thankful. I can live into what God has called me to be when my heart is right. Hope y'all still with me out there. Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called children of God. See, peace doesn't just appear. Somebody has to go and make it. And sometimes you got to cause a revolution. You got to cause a disturbance. You got to flip some tables over to get peace. Jesus says, blessed are those who take the risk of making peace. It's a risk to make peace. You can let the tension between you and someone just broil and boil, and it'd be 20 years and no peace is made. It takes risk. It takes a risk to jump over that and say, you know what? I'm going to make some peace. We love to get peace. But Jesus says, you got to go make peace, create peace. Making peace, everyone can be a testifying witness to this. It's hard to make peace, especially with people who love chaos, who love destruction. And if I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about all of us. Each of us has been on the other side where we refused the peacemaking process. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers. They gonna be called children of God. And blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Verse 11. Blessed are you when people revile you, persecute you, utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Jesus is talking about intense physical harm by those of their community who are Jewish and those outside of their community who are Rome. The Jewish folks may harm their own brothers and sisters, Jesus, and you may be harmed because you believe differently. And there's nothing that will cause you instant exile is to believing differently than what everybody else thinks. Oh, nothing gets you put out more than not having a herd mentality. When you start evolving theologically, start seeing the world differently, and you don't see it like how the folks saw it in 1975 anymore. Jesus says, for my sake, you are blessed. You can handle that level of persecution to follow me and follow me as I introduce you to who you are personally. You can handle that, you're blessed, because the prophets who saw it differently, who was in the minority, suffered persecution. And we see it today. We persecute people who don't think like us, don't look like us, don't talk like us, don't identify like us. Rejoice and be glad. Jesus says, when you find yourself, rejoice and be glad. When you can take the evil and slander, rejoice and be glad. If you can withstand the persecution now, it's not so much, especially when we're talking about us and our faith as Christians, we don't have to worry so much about physical harm. But if you can take slander and folks talking about you, and we need to be careful because a lot of that happens from us against other people. If you can withstand and endure, rejoice and be glad. Verse 12. Your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Here's how we close it out in verse 13 and 14. Jesus says, you are the salt of the earth. They would understand this in a major way. They didn't have refrigerators, so how would they preserve their fish? How would they preserve their meat? They would use salt. Salt preserves, and salt as a property, the properties within sodium, has a preservative in it that allows it to keep things from decaying and rotting. Jesus says, I need you to be the salt of the earth. I need you to preserve and keep things in order that's breaking away. It's an affirmation and a declaration and a command at the same time. It's really like I'm saying, I need you to be the salt of the earth. I want you to become my dream for you is to be the salt of the earth. But get this, but if salt loses its taste, not only is salt a preservative that keeps things from decaying, but salt adds flavor to blandness. and pause. Some of us need to slow down on the salt in this perspective. But if salt loses its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? Ain't not like losing your flavor. Jesus is what happens when you lose your flavor. How can it be restored? It's no longer good for anything to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. And useless salt in first century Palestine, they would throw pounds of it in dumps because it was no good anymore. It was cast away out the city. Jesus says, when you lose your voice, when you lose your perspective, when you lose your flavor, when you lose who you are, you're good for nothing to be cast out. I love Ocean's 13. It just came, Ocean's 11 series. Oh, and I forget my man's name. He was an older guy. And on the third, Ocean's 13, Al Pacino gyps him out of the ownership of the casino. And in the end, he started to dress different. He started to try to talk different, but he loved wearing leisure suits, big pink lapels, big glasses, flashy guy. He tried to be something he was not. And Don Cheadle, who was Basher, just wrote him letters as he was sick because he had a heart attack after being snuffed out of the deal. When he came to, and Danny Ocean and Bernie Mac and them got his rights back and his money back, he says, you got to be who you are. I was dying when I was trying to be somebody else. And we'll keep dying when we try to be someone else. That's salt losing its taste, its flavor. But also, when it gets cold and icy, when you throw salt out, it causes you to not slip. So salt helps us to preserve. Salt helps us to add flavor, but salt helps us to maneuver through slippery situations. You are the light of the world. The city built on the hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under a lamp basket. Rather, they put it on a lampstand and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before people, not just men if you got an old King James on now, before humanity, before everybody, so they can see your good works and glorify God in heaven. He just says a parliament taught me this. I went to a concert. Thank you, Brandy, for taking me there in August, and I saw a Parliament Funkadelic, and I am a Funkadelic now. And one of my favorite lines is so much theology within the Parliament P-Funk universe, the cosmology that George Clinton and Bernie Worrell and Bootsy Collins and the Parlettes and everyone created. And one line I love on Flashlight at the end, everybody has a little light under the sun. So Jesus is saying, George's church influence came out right there. He just says, you are the light of the world. Don't be afraid. Shine. Let your light shine. People will always try to dim the luminosity of your light. Shine anyway. People will try to dim you. Even we try to dim ourselves. We don't walk in our greatness. We shrink. No, let your light shine. Don't put it under a lampstand. Somebody traveling in darkness, spiritual, financial, psychological, is dependent upon our light. So let it shine. Shining. Can't you see it shining? Frankie Beverly would say. It says, let your light shine before everybody so they can glorify God, because they know if you're shining, it has to be from God. It has to be God sparking the light. Let your light so shine before people so they will glorify God in heaven. And no, went too fast. Let your light so shine before people so they may what? See your good works. You can't shine being stuck in inactivity. You can't shine being stationary. Our lights only shine when we're engaged in work, making it happen, working on the dream, working in making our relationships better, serving in the church. I tell this story time and time again. My first time in Princeton Seminary's library. It's the largest library outside of the Vatican. So as books they have access to and online resources. So when I was a fellow for the Black Theology and Religion Fellow, stayed there for a week, and the church was kind enough to sponsor me my second year at First Baptist. And I said, they went to hang out and eat. I said, I'm gonna check out this library. I only got time today to check it out. It was just me and a few of the students, and I was downstairs just looking around, and the lights went out. And I yelled up because I was scared because they had a bunch of paintings of old white men who was looking at me like I wasn't supposed to be there. And I yelled up, I said, excuse me, the lights turned out down here. She says, they're motion lights. So the lights only shine when you get moving. And when I moved out of my fear and took a step, a light came on. When I took another step, a light came on. When I stood still, it got dark. But each step had some light for me. And that's how life works. Let your light shine and take some steps and watch God show you new directions as you engage in work. So that's our lesson tonight for the Beatitudes. And we'll look at the rest of Matthew 5 next week. Pray for one another, love one another, and let's serve and help each other. So people will see our good works as a church, as individuals, as neighbors, and they'll give God glory. It's not only in heaven, but right here among us. Amen.